I don't know what the fuck this is, but it was in my recommended multiple times. So I thought, I may as well watch it, right?
I could comb away my troubles, but all I have is stubble without a hat to wear. I could use a brush for hours and clog the drains of showers if I only had some hair.
I hate that noise. Always makes me think the world's ending.
The National Weather Service has issued a downward spiral warning in your area. Please remain calm. Do not attempt to flee or seek shelter. Resistance is futile.
Oh, you stupid son of a...
The fuck?
Oh boy, I have a feeling we're not in Florida anymore.
I am Dr.
It's not even a bad thing.
The great and powerful. Welcome to Green Screen City.
Hey, I've seen you before. You look just like that man behind the curtain.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. You were brought here because you wished for your hair back.
Wait, I can tell where this is going. Are you really doing this again? Were the 4 other times not enough?
Pay no attention to the 4 other ads I've done for this product. I put a lot of work into this one. Just look at all these zany green screen effects.
Am I watching an ad?
You sold out, man. What happened to you? You used to be cool.
You want to know what's cool? Having hair. You should know, considering that
True.
little song you were singing just 2 minutes ago.
Wait, I'm sorry. I was just being bitter because I didn't discover Keeps until it was too late.
Silence!
Keeps.
I was prepared to grant you Keeps' 90% effectiveness at reducing and stopping the symptoms of hair loss. I was prepared to connect you with an online doctor and have your order shipped right to your door. But now, your insolence has made me reconsider. You don't deserve the most affordable FDA-approved hair loss product.
Wait, no! Please save my hair! I'll do anything!
Silence! You had your chance to visit keeps.com/emplemon for 50% off your first order.
All right. Listen, I'll watch it. Listen,
You're
I'll
doomed
watch
to
it.
lose all the rest of your
Just
hair
a little bit
and
sped
wind
up.
like my cousin, Dr. Oz. I command you to leave this place immediately.
Oh, what a world! What a world!
The Wizard of Oz is one
The fuck is? What am I watching?
of the most iconic films in the history of cinema. According to the Library of Congress, it's the single most watched film of all time.
Really?
Very few artistic works from
I
the
had no idea.
1930s have managed to persist within the public consciousness. But even now, 82 years later, most of you watching know exactly who these characters are. Far less known, however, are the people behind these characters.
True.
Principal photography for The Wizard of Oz lasted from October 1938 to March 1939. During these 5 months, the stars of the movie were subject to some of the most horrendous conditions
That's
in
not
the
even that
history
bad.
of
That's
the
a
American
short
film industry. When it was all said
film
and
time.
done, not a single character who set off down the yellow brick road left the land of Oz unscathed.
By the drought, even harder than England, rural America is in a desperate plight.
That's not to say that things were much better back home in Kansas.
The Dust
The
Bowl.
1930s were a period of major turmoil and hardship for the American public. The Great Depression ravaged almost every sector of the economy. While most American industries were struggling, the film industry was booming. To escape from the dread of everyday life, most Americans sought refuge in the cinema. Nowadays, about 1 in 10 Americans have gone to the movies in the past week. In the 30s, however,
Not
it was
much
not
lately.
uncommon for half of all Americans to pay a weekly visit to the
Wow.
theater. Hollywood was in the midst of its golden...
Yeah, but weren't fucking movies like 5 cents or something? You'd go in and it was like you could just like, go every day. Well, okay, well I know like with inflation and stuff, it probably isn't accurate, but I'm just saying whatever.
age, a period where studios had unparalleled influence over the industry. During this time, the top 8 studios controlled 95% of American cinema, and no studio was more illustrious than MGM.
That's what MGM is? Metro Goldwyn something? I had no idea.
They were the studio widely considered to provide audiences with the biggest stars and the grandest spectacle. MGM smoked the rest of Hollywood with its unmatched financial and critical success. Across the 30s, MGM films accounted for nearly a third of the nominees for Best Picture, and nearly
Damn.
3/4 of the total profits
Damn.
generated by all 8 major studios.
They're making mad money.
MGM's dominance over Hollywood was due in large part to the strong leadership of its chief executive, Louis B. Mayer, who in 1937 was the highest paid man in America. 1937 also saw the release of one of the most groundbreaking films ever made, and one of the most successful films of the time to not come out of the MGM system.
Sleeping Beauty?
That year, Walt Disney would release his first animated feature film,
Snow White.
and the Seven Dwarfs.
Snow White.
The film was an immersive fantasy unlike anything audiences had ever seen, and by the following year had become the highest-grossing film to date. Snow White's record-breaking success inspired MGM to produce a spectacular fantasy of their own. In 1938, the studio bought out the rights to L. Frank Baum's popular children's novel The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and the rest was history. A history that some members of the cast and crew wished they could forget. Unlike Snow White, The Wizard of Oz was entirely live action, which presented a series of challenges while attempting to transform fantasy into reality.
How bad could it possibly have been?
One of the most iconic scenes in all of cinema is Dorothy waking up in the land of Oz and the film transitioning from sepia to color. The official coloring method used to develop the film was Technicolor, which required heavy exposure due to the process of splitting the image into different color channels. As a result, the Oz set required an exorbitant amount of lighting, so much so that the temperature on stage often surpassed 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wait, what? It was 100 degrees? What about the dude in the fucking metal suit? Was he like cooking in there or something? What the fuck? That's insane. Oh wait, you know what? I just thought about this. In this time, there wasn't really like, what's it called? There wasn't really like labor unions or anything, so you were kind of just fucked if you wanted to. If you didn't want to work, it was like, okay, well, don't work then, go home, right? Damn, that's horrible.
The heat was suffocating, and stagehands frequently had to be carried off stage after fainting. The set lighting was so intense that some actors even claimed to suffer permanent vision damage. The exhaustion suffered from the oppressive heat was only magnified by the arduous production schedule. For 6 days a week, the actors walked into the studio at 4 a.m. and didn't leave until 7 p.m. Wow. A significant part of each actor's day was dedicated to the meticulous preparation and removal of their costumes. The Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion are one of the most recognizable trios in fiction.
Right.
All 3 characters were brought to life by the skilled design of makeup artist Jack Dawn. While the costumes presented an impeccable external appearance, conditions weren't so pleasant on the inside. Every morning as the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger would have to spend an hour getting his latex and plastic mask painstakingly glued to his face, and every evening he would spend an hour getting it removed. The mask completely covered his facial pores, meaning that he was physically unable to sweat while wearing it.
What?
One could only imagine how it must have felt to wear that thing for 15 hours a day. But Ray Bolger didn't have to imagine. For 22 weeks, it was his reality. By the time filming was complete, the repeated applications of the mask left Bolger with permanent grooves around his mouth and chin.
Is this accurate? These marks actually ended up on his face because of wearing that shit? Dude, how are there not massive lawsuits made in this thing? I get there wasn't like worker abuse protection and shit. What is this?
But considering what happened to some of the other actors, he may have gotten off easy.
Oh no.
The Tin Man was played by Buddy Ebsen for about 9 days. That's how long he lasted during filming until he was hospitalized from a severe reaction to the Tin Man's metallic makeup.
What?
Ebsen's silver face paint was made out of aluminum powder that would eventually coat the inside of his lungs, nearly asphyxiating him.
What?
As Ebsen sat bedridden under an oxygen tent in the hospital, the studio could not have given him less
Holy
sympathy.
shit.
Producer Mervyn LeRoy repeatedly phoned the hospital, angrily insisting that Ebsen return to the set. After 2 weeks out of action, the studio replaced Ebsen with Jack Haley. Much like Pete Best getting cut from the Beatles, Buddy Ebsen would end up becoming one of the unluckiest men in show business. Not only was he unceremoniously fired from what would have been the biggest role of his career, the incident left him with chronic bronchitis.
That is fucking
Jack
sad.
Haley managed to avoid a catastrophic
So he got
reaction
screwed.
to the aluminum makeup, but it still gave him a severe eye infection that forced him out of work for days. The rest of the suit was so stiff that it rendered Haley unable to sit down or lie down during filming. In order to rest in between takes, he was forced to lean on a reclining board.
Oh my
But despite all the
god.
complications
That's
it caused,
terrible.
the Tin Man costume may have still been preferable to that of the Cowardly Lion. Burt Lahr's lion suit was compared to carrying around a mattress. The bulk of the costume consisted of a 60-pound lion hide. A real lion hide. Combined with additional padding, some estimates put the weight of the full costume at 100 pounds. Burt Lahr would become drenched in sweat after just a few minutes, and he would frequently have to take off the suit between shots to avoid exhaustion. The prosthetic mask covering his face didn't allow him to fully open his mouth, forcing him to consume all of his on-set meals through a straw. Halfway through production, Lahr gave in and sacrificed an additional hour each day in the makeup chair so that he could eat solid food at lunch. As someone who was known by his peers to be a hypochondriac, Burt Lahr was in near constant agony. But by far the worst costume-related accident during the whole shoot happened to Margaret Hamilton, better known as the Wicked Witch.
I'm legitimately shocked. How much did they get paid is my question. To put up with this much stuff? I mean, the pay had to be ridiculous for that time, right? If they were getting paid fucking chump change on top of it, like...
Nowadays, there are lots of ways to make someone look green, but in 1938, the only tried and true method used by Hollywood makeup artists was copper paint. Copper, of course, is toxic when ingested by humans.
Oh, God.
This was known back then, but the studio showed no restraint in applying the copper concoction directly to Hamilton's face and hands.
Really?
Towards the end of production, Hamilton realized that the constant application of the witch's makeup had tinted her skin green, an effect that lingered for months after the job. Wearing the makeup on set was a constant struggle. Once it was on, Hamilton was unable to touch anything without staining it, and required assistance to perform the most basic of tasks. But the day-to-day struggles of the makeup would pale in comparison to the accident she suffered on December 23, 1938.
Oh no.
When departing Munchkinland, Hamilton was scripted to exit the scene in a fiery cloud of smoke.
Jesus Christ.
The first attempt at the stunt went flawlessly,
Oh.
but director Victor Fleming wanted to get a few extra takes for insurance.
Uh-oh.
On the fourth attempt, the pyrotechnics were ignited too early, causing Hamilton to be engulfed in flames. The accident resulted in second-degree burns on the whole right side of her face.
Wow.
The skin on her right hand was entirely scalded off.
Ugh.
But before Hamilton could even receive medical attention,
Holy
she had
shit.
to slowly and excruciatingly have the copper makeup removed from her freshly burned skin with rubbing alcohol. Margaret Hamilton would spend the next 6 weeks in the hospital before returning to the set. On her very first day back, she was scheduled for the skywriting scene, another stunt involving pyrotechnics. Hamilton adamantly refused to put herself.
I'm not
anywhere
doing
near
this shot. I'm
fire
not doing
again
any other
and
shot with
threatened
any
to
kind of
walk out the
fire.
production right then and there. Since the project was nearing completion at
Fuck
that
me.
point, the studio acquiesced, and the scene was completed using Hamilton's stunt double, Betty Danko.
Why didn't they just use the stunt double from the beginning? Wait, what? Why would you even have a stunt double if you're not gonna like use the stunt double until the person gets third-degree burns all over them? By the way, this is still horrible. Even if the stunt double did it, they would have probably suffered that injury. That's terrible.
While filming that very scene, the smoke pipe underneath the broomstick exploded, and Danko was violently flung from the installation. The explosion was caused by the special effects crew coating the pipe with asbestos.
What?
Another toxic substance once thought to be an all-purpose wonder material. Asbestos was also used in Ray Bolger's scarecrow suit as well as the snow in the poppy field scene.
What the fuck? Did everybody get cancer? They were throwing asbestos all over them. You understand that if there's a fucking asbestos leak or something somewhere, they have to bring in people in fucking hazmat suits to clean it up because of how easy it can cause cancer. Holy shit. What the fuck?
Unusual weather we're having, ain't it?
Betty
Yeah, a
Danko
little sunny with the chance of cancer and tumors. Like, what?
was hospitalized for 11 days with internal damage from the explosion, as well as a 2-inch deep gash on her leg. A
Ow.
wound that would never fully heal. It was a hefty toll for a gig in which she earned just over $800.
Oh my god. $825. I get it. Back then the prices were different, but how much could this have been when you're looking at like fucking when the fucking comparison is okay, working at a factory, right? Let's say you earn $525 or something. and you're getting $300 more, and you're gonna get fucking scarred for life. You're gonna probably get cancer. You might just die in a pyrotechnics accident. Wow.
The long-term health effects on Margaret Hamilton were far less known. What is known is that she would go on to develop Alzheimer's later in her
Aw.
life, a condition that has been linked to copper poisoning.
Wow, that's fucking sad. See that shit? Wow. That's terrible.
In total, 6 performers on The Wizard of Oz faced some kind of serious physical trauma. Not even Toto left the set intact.
Toto was forced out of action for 2 weeks with a sprained foot after one of the witch's guards accidentally stepped on her. Oh my god. Oh shit. This is terrible.
However, after enough time had passed, many of the actors could look back on the whole ordeal as a bunch of amusing war stories. Most physical ailments are only temporary. Mental ailments,
Too bad
on
the
the
fucking
other hand,
trauma.
tend to stick with you for life. And out of everyone in the land of Oz, perhaps none suffered a worse fate than the star of the show, Judy Garland. She was without a doubt one of the most talented performers of the 20th century. Her portrayal of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz has served as an enduring symbol of youth and innocence. And even though she was never imprisoned by a brutal costume like the other actors, the studio paid no less scrutiny to her appearance. Since the character of Dorothy was envisioned as a prepubescent girl, the then 17-year-old
What?
Garland had to constantly wear a tight corset to hide her more mature figure. But that was merely one aspect of the studio's efforts to keep Judy thin. Garland was placed on a shoestring diet, one that would not provide her with enough energy to complete the arduous filming days. To compensate, the studio kept Garland on a steady intake of amphetamines to keep her working long into the day. The amphetamines subsequently necessitated the use of barbiturates to prevent Garland from exhausting herself.
Oh my god.
Years later, she claimed that during some periods she would only sleep 4 hours every.
Judy Garland, they'd give us pills to keep us on our feet long after we were exhausted. Then they'd take us to the studio hospital and knock us out with sleeping pills. Then after 4 hours, they'd wake us up and give us the pep pills again so we could work 72 hours in a row. Wow.
3 days. The fact that she was able to perform as well as she did under these conditions is nothing short of astonishing. By the end of production, Garland was addicted to both drugs, an addiction that would last for the rest of her life. It certainly
Wow.
didn't help that her time as a child star directly contributed to deep-rooted psychological problems. Despite her brilliance as a performer, Garland was always encumbered by major esteem issues. The insecurities began when a 14-year-old Garland overheard the MGM executives referring to her as a fat little pig. This moment
What?
completely devastated her self-image, and manifested itself as an unobtainable standard of perfection that she spent her whole life chasing. And even though she would wind up becoming one of the greatest performers ever, in her mind it was never good enough. In many ways, Judy Garland was the first tragic child star, an archetype that has sadly become much more common in modern times. Clinical psychiatrist John
Right.
Linden encountered many such patients while practicing in the Los Angeles area. He observed that premature stardom
Britney.
resulted in many child actors forming severe identity issues. They tended to report a feeling of profound emptiness
As
when
dead
they
when
weren't
they're not
performing,
working?
as if they were marionettes whose true selves lacked any sort of meaning. The reason so many young stars
Oh, come
end up
on.
on the downward spiral is that many fail to develop any sense of individual identity.
Downward spiral after Mila Kunis dumped him. Can you blame him?
Some attempt to fill this void with sex, drugs, and alcohol, but it's often no match for the constant anxiety of never really understanding who you are. There exists a tragic irony between Judy Garland and
Oh,
Dorothy.
by the way, I was today years old when I learned that the fucking kid from Home Alone dated Mila Kunis. What the fuck? Really? That's awesome.
A character who wanted nothing more than to find joy and comfort in a wayward world. Unlike Dorothy, however, Judy Garland never made it over the rainbow. On June 22, 1969, Judy Garland was found dead of an overdose on her bathroom floor.
She
She was
OD'd?
just 47 years old. In the years leading up to her death, her increasingly erratic downfall was treated by the media as some sort of morbid spectacle. The American public seemed unable to reconcile how she could have possibly been anyone other than the innocent farm girl from Kansas.
I never knew she OD'd. That's insane. I never knew that.
Hollywood has the remarkable ability to make the wildest parts of our imagination come to life, but the magic of crafting immersive fantasies comes with a very real dark side. Oftentimes it's easy for studios to lose sight of the real-life human beings at their disposal and to end up treating them as, well, marionettes. It would be easy to look back at all the trauma from The Wizard of Oz and chalk it up to a product of its time. Back then, studios could just get away with all of it because if any actor fought back, they would
If I
be
sued, I'd never
blacklisted
work
from
again
the
in any
industry.
studio.
But still, even after the
Fuck.
studio's iron grip over the industry was broken and actors gained more leverage over their careers, it would be naive to suggest that much has changed in Hollywood. The inner
Fucking this dude.
workings of the film
You know what's hilarious? I remember when I was hearing about the story from the at the very beginning, Harvey Weinstein, when all the victims started coming out and fucking talking about him and shit. When all that was coming out, the very beginning, I remember seeing he was walking around just completely normally, and then once he was gonna get incarcerated, the dude had a walking stick and was fucking walking like a fucking 95-year-old man. I was like, what a load of shit. He had the little tennis balls on it and everything. Fuck off.
industry have always been an enigma. The history of Hollywood is smeared with talented people guilty of terrible
What
things.
the fuck is this?
Very rarely do we ever get to discover what truly goes on behind the big green curtain. Out of every scandal that does come to
God.
light, we can only imagine what remains in the dark. In the business of telling the biggest stories possible, the smaller stories often get left behind. For 22 weeks in 1938 and 1939, 6 of Hollywood's most talented actors were practically tortured, with many of them experiencing long-lasting and permanent damage to their bodies and minds. The result was one of the single greatest artistic works of the 20th century. The Wizard of Oz was the defining career achievement for every single person who worked on it. Their suffering had directly contributed to the most beloved film of a generation. It's tempting to dismiss everything you've heard today as an exploitative cash grab from greedy media tyrants, but for MGM it was never that simple. In 1939, MGM released 41 films in total, premiering a new movie once every 9 days on average.
Damn.
At this time, the studio had no shortage of revenue. What they coveted instead was prestige. Every year, MGM would earmark one production as their prestige film, a project that was never intended to turn a profit, but one that existed for the simple purpose of flexing the cinematic might of the studio. From its very conception, The Wizard of Oz was designed as a monument to the single most dominant empire in the history of the film industry.
It fucking worked out.
35 years after the film's release, toy executive Marty Abrams was conducting market research on local children and found that 80% recognized the characters of Oz. Today, memorabilia attached to these characters now sell for
$3 million
millions at auction.
for
Over
a costume?
the years, the performers who brought these characters to life have gradually faded from public memory, their sacrifices ultimately forgotten. Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, Cowardly Lion, and the Wicked Witch have managed to outlive them. Such is the ultimate destiny of people in show business. Actors are tragically temporary. Eventually, only the characters remain. Today, it may seem unfathomable that our most popular and celebrated actors will inevitably meet the same fate. But at the end of the day, it is art, not the artist, which stands the test of time.
I don't know about that, because if you think about it, nowadays, back then it was yeah, we're going to go watch a movie in the theaters, right? So we're going to go and spend 5 cents on our popcorn and shit. And, I don't remember, we watched that one Wizard of Oz movie with that lion guy and the tin guy. Nowadays it's wait, who was it that played, Endgame came out 15 years ago. Who was that played Iron Man? Oh, it was Robert Downey Jr., right? Oh, I know Will Smith from iRobot and other fucking movies, right? The Pursuit of Happiness. With the ability to access information makes it so that you can't really forget those kind of things anymore. It's so easy to access, I think. But that's crazy that people might have actually forgotten. I didn't even know who any of the actors were. But Jesus, now that I know how horrible it was, that's terrible.
Despite the turmoil suffered by the actors on the set of Oz, one has to wonder if any of them ever regretted it. "4,500 years ago, the ancient Egyptians completed the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure so remarkably ambitious that it would stand as the tallest building on Earth until
Aliens.
the Middle Ages. For millennia, archaeologists found it inconceivable that it could have been constructed by any other means than a massive workforce of slave labor. The pyramid defied our expectations to such an extent that some people believe it had to have resulted from supernatural or
I told you!
extraterrestrial influence. However, recent archaeological studies have uncovered a truth that is somehow even more unbelievable. The vast majority of people who built the Great Pyramid were volunteers. The ancient Egyptians risked life and limb to participate in something greater than themselves. Their reward for 20 years of deadly back-breaking labor is that we still talk about them today, long after everything they knew and loved ceased.
Is that a real picture? Can you actually see like the freeway and then in the distance the pyramids? That is amazing if that's real. That looks fucking massively photoshopped.
To exist. What would you be willing to sacrifice if it meant you could live forever? Since the dawn of civilization, mankind has sought the secret to immortality.
Okay, well, I don't think any of these people were like, oh my goodness, this movie's going to immortalize me. I'm pretty sure they were thinking like, hey, I could pay the bills and it'll help me get more opportunities in the film industry, right? And then they were like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. I'm getting copper poisoning and shit. I don't think any of them were thinking like legacy-wise. Especially Judy Garland, right? Since she was so young when she even started like the role. She was like 17, so I don't think she was thinking about immortalizing herself.
We can only wonder if
just happened to
science
be
or religion
something.
will ever help us achieve eternal life. But at the very least, art can get us pretty damn close.
Damn. Good video. That was sad though. Jesus. That's fucked up, yo. That's messed up. Definitely makes you think about it now. Makes you think more about, like, damn.